welcome back to On the Flip Side. My name is Adam Shawalker, your host. Today we are going to be going over the new album from King Woman, the follow-up to 2017's Created in the Image of Suffering, Celestial Blues. This album explores a bit more of a brooding side of King Woman and a deeper expanse into the emotional depth of the band. The first song on the album is the title track, Celestial Blues. An immediate palpable tension is created with the softly spoken poetry and reverbed out guitar intro that careens into a wall of gain and distortion. The production is incredibly clean and the arrangement reminds me a lot of the songs from bands like Mammoth, Weed, Wizard, Bastard. There's a lot of clear influence from pretty much every kind of doom metal project you could think of, with some kind of shoegaze sensibilities, blended into a mix of, some black metal and death metal. Overall, this is a really excellent multifaceted intro track that helps lay out expectations for the record, I'd say, pretty nicely. The next track on the album is called Morning Star. A similar slow vocal piece is delivered to build some tension for another release of doom metal gain. This time, though, the track does a bit of a catch and release where they switch from these soft, slow, clean parts to these overdriven segments that have these very tribal drum beats and blood-pumping levels of gain. This track is one of those songs that benefits from being played at very high volume, as the mix is pretty rich and layered very nicely. The third track we've got is Boggs, that's spelled B-O-G-H-Z, so I'm fairly certain it's pronounced like Boggs, but there's a bit of a pattern here that's kind of emerging at this point, building on these calm, reverbed out intros and exploding into high-intensity segments. I guess it's kind of like a basic verse-chorus-verse thing, and it's pretty common for like doom metal as a whole, but it gets kind of obvious at this point, a little bit tired. However, the intro for this song is drawn out quite a lot more and, really leans into the tribal rhythms a bit for the drums and kind of helps expand the lifespan of that kind of delivery. Also, the vocal delivery is a lot more violent on this song. After the drop of the axe that is the transition, there's points in this song that sound blatantly vicious, like an animal lashing out in defense. It's very well done despite the relatively formulaic song structuring. The next track is Golgotha, one of the longer tracks on the album. Begins with a fairly dramatic progression that almost seems a bit folksy in some segments, kind of like a goth folk track for this odd off-tempo swinging track that builds in volume but not really in intensity. This track does a really great job of kind of throwing you off the formula a bit by drawing things out quite nicely and allowing the segments of the song they're working with to do kind of breathe a little bit and fall into a little bit of a groove before changing things up. Also, the effects that they're using on the guitars create some really, frankly, insane noises that are pretty impressive with the way they modulate them. There's a lot of really creative uses of violin on this track as well that make the track very melancholy and beautiful. For me, this is definitely a high point for this album. Next up is Coil, the shortest track on the album. Kicks off with a drum and bass groove that wastes no time at all, building up a very shoegazy soundscape that gets kind of bastardized into a sludge groove. This is the most straightforward and to-the-point song that we've heard so far. Overall, it's an incredibly solid track that, kind of reaches into that, epic-sounding territory, but doesn't really subject you to the mammoth song lengths that style tends to typically utilize. Up next is Entwined. Things slow down a bit for the start of this track with a very heavy reverbed guitar part that fills the mix out nicely. A drum beat starts and continues up this slow tempo beat that is just enough to bob your head along to. The vocal delivery is powerful and moved up to the front of the mix for the clean parts and is layered into the mix for these wall of sound segments, which adds a pretty nice effect. The actual structure of this song doesn't end up changing very much for the most part over the 6 or so minute runtime, so it does get a little bit redundant after a bit, though we do get a decent build-up and breakdown towards the end of this song, but it's still very similar, setup and execution style to a lot of the rest of these songs on this album. The one thing this song really has going for it is that it has some of the most intense vocal deliveries on the album, so that is a little bit of a saving grace here for this one. Track 7 is Psychic Wound. This is a track you can tell was a single as soon as it starts, as this is one of the more unique sounding songs on the album. I do think it is one of the best songs here, though with some very hefty guitar lines that dip a little bit into that kind of Middle Eastern scales, flair, and they blend it with some of these fantastic waves of black metal vocals layered on top of these clean vocals for one of the most intense listening experiences on the album. This song kind of feels like being cornered like a dog. I think this is probably the best track on the album. Up next is Ruse. This second to last track leans into the drums really heavily with some incredibly crisp beats playing off of the bass line in this song. The singer seems to be reaching into the lower register as much as possible for this song as well, and there's some segments here that really sound like outtakes from like a Melvins record. The end of this song kind of builds up again for a bit of a wash of noise that by this point in the album is pretty tired as a method of impact. I do enjoy the song, but I do wish there was a bit more effort put into the writing for this song, as by this point in the album, things are just starting to feel a little bit redundant. The final track on this album is Paradise Lost. This song starts off very similarly to the rest of the songs on this album, with a soft vocal delivery and reverbed out guitars that are abruptly interrupted by drums that signal that this is the beginning of the ramp-up in tension until the inevitable breakdown of gain and distortion-heavy riffs, which for whatever reason just doesn't happen for this song. It's really interesting that they frame this song out the same way they do all of the rest of the tracks and kind of hit you right at the end of the album with a song that defies expectations while also ending up as one of the least climactic songs on the album. It's slow going and fairly, pretty, but it's a little bit too late in my opinion as far as a change-up in their formula goes. I really wish this song was not right at the end of the record and that, maybe there's more elements of this songwriting style in the rest of the songs on this album. Mostly because it would have given the album a lot more variety that was very much needed. As far as my final thoughts go, I really do think this is a fairly solid record. I enjoyed listening to all of it, but there's just some problems with what is necessary here and what should have been reworked so, that this album kind of would have been a bit more cohesive and so things would have fit a little bit better. I do absolutely love the song Golgotha and Psychic Wound, but the rest of the songs here I can kind of take or leave. Celestial Blues, in my mind, is a pretty decent 5. Thanks again for watching. If you didn't know, I have a Reverb store up now, links in the description. Please leave a comment and let me know what I should cover next. If you liked this video, please do consider subscribing and drop a like on the video. I do work really hard on these and it really helps get these videos seen a lot more, and as a result will help make these videos a better experience overall for everyone involved, myself included, and for y'all for your viewing experience. I do love doing this for you guys and I'll have much more to come soon. Thank you all so much again, and we will see you on the flip side.